the study session for the City Council for the City of Wheat Ridge, Colorado for June 17th, 2024. Thank you all for being here. Let's see, we have 2, 3, 4, 5. I know that Councilor Weaver and Councilor Dozeman had called in with an absence, so everyone else is here, and I hope that we see Councilor Snell join us soon. So we have 2 items on our agenda this evening. Item number 1 is the Wheat Ridge Siren Emergency Notification System, and item number 2 is City Charter Update and Modernization. We start our meetings with public comment. I don't have anyone signed up to speak on public comment in the council chamber or online, so we will move past that item and go to agenda item number 1. This is the Wheat Ridge Siren Emergency Notification System update. And Mr. Goff, do you have a staff presentation on this item?
We do. Jim Lawrence, our division chief, one of our division chiefs, is here.
Okay. Division Chief Lorenz, take it away.
Good evening, Council, Mr. Mayor, Mr. Goff. So this is kind of a simple thought. I don't want to take up too much of your time because I know you got a lot to talk about with the charter cleanup this evening. We established a siren emergency notification system in 2008, so it is now 16 years old. That was purchased with 911 Authority grant money, so it was a great deal at the time. But 16 years later, the equipment is not really viable anymore. We're paying maintenance on that every year, and we've come to the point where we're unable to get parts for some of this equipment to keep it going. To keep the system as it is intact, or to have an emergency siren kind of system, would be to really buy an entire new system. That's what Lakewood has been looking at. They have decided that they're not going to continue with the siren system. Arvada, City of Arvada had sirens, and they did away with them about 2 years ago. So it's really just a system that has seen its day. If we did replace it, we would be spending somewhere between $1.5 to $3 million to get the kind of system back to where it needs to be. But the fact is, it's really not necessary. In this day and age, we have the Lookout Alert system, which is managed by the Jeffcom 911 system. It hits everybody's cell phone if you sign up for it, and every landline is automatically set up for the Lookout Alert system. And you would get those notifications there. We also have the internet, television, radio, so many ways to get notified that this type of system is just too expensive, I think, to continue at this point. We would also be saving some $10,000 a year on maintenance that we normally pay, and the system, the Lookout Alert system that we have, doesn't cost anything. Of course, it does cost, but it's through the 911 Authority, and there's no additional cost to the city or to customers other than what they pay through their phone bills. So I think that's all I have for you, unless you have any questions. Our recommendation is that we do away with this system, and we would have to take those towers down eventually over time. There's no danger in them. Once they're turned off, they'll be fine, and we could phase in the cost of taking those down over several years in the city budget. So that would be our recommendation at this point.
Okay, thank you. Questions for council? We'll start with Councilor Ohm.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, DC Chief Lawrence. So the one question I had was on the I just want to say thank you for actually saving the city some money every year. I couldn't agree with you more. I'm not in favor of having them any longer. I can hardly hear what they're saying half the time. The question I did have, though, was specifically on the towers. Is there a safety reason to take down the towers? Because what I'm thinking of, this is what I'm thinking of, is the towers are already in place. We're already used to them. And you may not know the answer, but and maybe staff might have to come back. But could we use those to lease those to cell tower carriers because they're already in place? And then, so that's my thought. The reason why taking them down.
Yeah. These are not really towers. They're just a utility pole with a, kind of looks like a trash can sitting on top of it. It's about that size, round. If you look right out here on the north side of the building, we have one. I don't know if that's a viable use for it. I don't think they're dangerous. I think there is a study that we would do to determine which ones need to come down or if they need to come down at all. I think that's a little bit down the road. They're probably unsightly, and over time, you don't want to keep, equipment that's not viable still up there. They would go down immediately and recycle the batteries and some of the electronics that are in there, so they would go up and take that down. But as far as the pole, I'm not sure what its value is at this point.
That's something to look at. It's a good point. We might look into it just
Yeah.
to make, before we take them down, spend that time.
Well, or you already kind of have the real estate. So if you
Yeah.
took the pole out and put something else in, that would work. And
Yeah.
yeah.
We'll consider that.
Okay. Thank you.
Counselor Hoppy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Division Chief Lawrence, for your memo. And I think that this is a pretty easy no-brainer. It's important that we don't waste taxpayer dollars on things that are not being utilized or that we can maintain. And if we don't find another purpose for the poles, I think your plan to slowly decommission over the next several years and do that throughout a budget system is a really good plan. And then I just would like to say one thing in the memo is that we've only used it once in the last 5 years for an actual emergency. So that really does tell us how kind of obsolete this is. So I'm in support of moving forward with getting rid of them. Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor Hulteen.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Chief Lawrence, for bringing this forward. I agree with everything that's been said. It's great to see something coming forward where we're like, let's not spend $1 to $3 million. So, and I really endorse Councilmember Ohm's suggestion of looking at adaptive reuse options, and I would like to add to that, maybe even asking the county. This is going to go out a little bit, but if there's any habitat reuse, because a lot of times they'll use tall poles like that for nesting options for some of the migratory birds that come through our area. So would just encourage us to be as open-minded about adaptive reuse as possible. And so I do have two questions and then just kind of a story. So I'll start with the questions. The new system that's being proposed, is it available in multiple language or is it just an English only language?
The lookout alert notifications?
Yeah.
It's a good question. I don't know the answer to that one.
Yeah, it'd be good to know if that alert comes through, since it's coming on cell phones, if it actually comes through on the primary language of the cell user, since we know we've got a lot of non-English speaking people in our community. And when it comes with...
I know we've talked with Alex Rose, our public information officer, and we'll start doing another drive to get people to sign up, some information that we'll put out. And it'll be in Connections, I believe, coming up, and maybe the mayor's message. And, yeah.
Okay.
That, well, I'll save for comments later. Then the second thing, we've talked for years about getting an electronic messaging board, and I believe we're getting more serious about one in front of the rec center.
We are. It's out to, RFP is out on that. And several of you, if not all of you, have been contacted. If not, you will be by Lamar Advertising. They're looking at additional message board opportunities throughout the city. So that may be a discussion that comes forward soon.
Okay, would it be possible for the system to tie into any city messaging boards that we have?
The lookout system? Yeah, I don't know if that.
Well, it certainly could be updated with the information.
Okay, all right. So the thing that kind of like, when I was reading the memo, it kind of tells the story of like the last 16 years in our city. And the systems really came out of the war era and Cold War. And, we have a lot of other things, emergencies that we need to notify our city about. But it really, to me, kind of told the story about, where were we 16 years ago and where are we now in terms of how we connect and how we reach people. And I think, I just want to celebrate that. I think as a city, we're doing the same modernization around reaching people, whether it's for an emergency or for community input. So just calling out a parallel path, and am happy to not spend $3 million to update it. Thank you.
Thank you. Counselor Larson.
Thank you, Mayor. Just a quick question here. Is the system still operating now?
It went down in the last 2 months due to some kind of parts problems. And it has either come up online just recently in the last week or so, or it will in about a week. It was estimated it would be up in July the 1st. So it sometimes goes down and it's not available. That's true.
Is there then a timeline for when it would be sort of officially decommissioned?
I think it would just be whenever the city thinks it's time to, probably a good time would be after we do a good public information program to promote Lookout Alert, and I would say after that.
Yeah, that would be my suggestion, that it just doesn't just kind of go away.
Right.
Yeah.
I know one of the problems we have with it is people they don't know what it is. And when the sirens go off, it just tends to get the more calls to the 911 system saying, what was that? And what is this about? So I'm not sure how much people are depending on that, but maybe the idea of it is something that they want, that they think that it's there that could be helpful.
Yeah, and there's just, if I might, I had thought about this a little bit, and I'd like to put the idea of these emergency notification sirens into context. Our emergency notification system is a legacy, as Councilmember Hulteen pointed out, of the civil defense sirens going all the way back. For those of us who grew up in the 1950s and 60s, the wail of those sirens was a weekly reminder that dangerous events in some far-off part of the world could cause widespread destruction, even in our quiet neighborhood. During that time, our parents held fresh memories of the World War, even while the Cold War occupied daily newspaper headlines. Every Tuesday morning, our local civil defense sirens were tested with a full minute of that mournful wail. During that minute, teachers stopped teaching to remind us that it was only a test, but if it were a real emergency class, what should we do? There was even a stretch during the Cuban Missile Crisis in 1963 when the weekly sirens meant the entire class was to quickly file into the hallway, stand quietly facing the wall, and wait for the voice in the PA to tell us it was okay to return to our classrooms. For my classmates and I, there was always something ominous and chilling when the sirens sounded their weekly test. That sound meant serious business, and fooling around was not tolerated. Civil defense sirens have been employed across the U.S. and in countries around the world for 3/4 of a century. For many years now, civil defense sirens have been integrated with broadcast media, text message, or voice alerts. And certainly if the siren sounded and it was not a regular test, something dangerous was headed this way. Now the civil defense sirens are going away, and we are asked to rely solely on our phones to warn us of an emergency, a weather emergency, or other impending calamity. To be sure, once the city of Wheat Ridge retires its emergency sirens, few people will miss them. So the next time you're in a restaurant and every cell phone in the room goes off at the same time, be grateful that we no longer have to listen to the ominous wailing of the emergency siren.
Thank you. We have 4 recommendations on page 2 of our memo. Yeah. Looks like we've concluded our conversation on this item. Do we have consensus to move this forward in those recommendations? Thank you so much. Looks like you've got your marching orders. Commander, thank you very much for the memo, and appreciate it. Okay, we're going now to go to item number 2, This is city charter updates and modernization. Mr. Goff, do we have a opening on this item?
We do. Thank you. My team's coming up reluctantly, slowly. This was a team effort with our city attorney, of course, and Alex Sheck, and
They're double teaming us.
yep. Marianne Schilling, actually all of our staff provided some input on suggested changes. It was interesting, some of the, yep, and our senior deputy city clerk provided a lot of input. It's interesting, a lot of the newer folks. I had a lot of questions about some of the charter sections. It's like, why is that in there? But
Speaking of legacy, right?
speaking of legacy, right? But the direction we received from city council was to do more of a simple cleanup at this point, not address all the larger policy discussions and implications. We do, just so you know, have a list of those for another discussion. If you'd like us to come back at a future date, or if you want to talk about them tonight, we're willing to do that. But what you see in front of you in your packet is, again, more of a general cleanup of the city charter. And I listed in your memo some general cleanups that we made throughout the charter, and then some specific sections, citations that where we had some specific changes. So we'll just go through those, maybe one at a time, and then we'll open it up for questions. But a little bit of history too on the charter. The charter was adopted in 1978 as a home rule charter, about almost a decade after the city was incorporated. We've had numerous changes throughout the years. I think the most recent one was the charter change to remove the height and density restrictions from some urban renewal areas in the city. One of the other major charter changes that happened in 1995, if I remember. Were you here, Mr. Dahl? We went from a strong mayor form of government to city council, or a council manager form of government. Those were the main two, I think, primary charter changes. There was a couple others to address some date issues with elections, and a few maybe other small cleanups. But again, tonight we have in front of you several suggested changes. The first one is to modernize the charter, as we mentioned earlier in the issue statement, for addressing gender pronouns. Throughout the charter, there's many references to individuals using he, his, and him. Mr. Dahl's office did a great job of redlining this. One of his paralegals, I believe, Cindy. And went through and found all the he, his, and hims, and changed those primarily to the actual position titles. So instead of he, him, or his, it was the city manager, the mayor, the council member. I think there was only maybe one reference or two that we used they or their to refer to the individual. Citizenship neutrality, somebody said that for that, neutrality. The charter referred to citizens throughout, and as you may remember, we did make these changes to some of our other documents and forms throughout the city with our council rules and some of our meeting procedures. So we did change that to residents throughout the charter. I'm sorry.
Do you want to see if we could get consensus on these items as we go through them?
Yeah, if you want.
You know.
Sure.
Maybe we go back to, I mean, some of them are more particular, but maybe we
Yeah.
can dispense with this and
That's
rather
fine
than
with me.
going back over. So speaking of gender pronouns, do we have discussion on that? Do we have consensus to move in the direction that the document's been edited? Consensus to move
Okay.
forward, so that one's okay.
Terrific, thank you.
Okay, how about citizen neutrality as expressed? We have consensus on that. Terrific.
Great
That takes you
suggestion,
to-
Mayor. Thank
okay.
you. Thank you. You really, we're going to get out here in
Well,
record time. maybe.
we have a lot of work to do tonight,
All
so
right.
let's just keep our noses down.
I'll turn this next one over to Mr. Dahl maybe, but legacy and transitional text. There's numerous sections referenced here, but do you mind, Mr. Dahl, talking about that, why that's recommended to remove?
Sure. When the charter was approved, there was basically a transitional period where a number of provisions were placed in the charter to address the fact that some things needed to happen after the charter was approved, but before they could be effective. And you see the list of charter sections there, and we can dial to them. Some of them are.
And maybe as an example.
Yeah, when you get to them, you'll see that the examples will kind of pop out at you. Let's go to, I think over in 17 is a good.
Yeah, go to the
Yeah,
last
spot
page,
toward the end, because
page
that's really
30,
where they.
37.
It says, 37 to 38, status of transitional provisions. And it's this transition period, it says, from November 6, 79 to December 31st. To after that period of time, we have to put into effect the provisions of this charter by resolution, designate the dates of various provisions become operational, continuation of elected offices, continuation of boards and commissions, and appointed officers and employees, because before the charter, you didn't necessarily have a city administrator in the same way, and didn't have the same officers and employees that we have now, at least by title. And so there's this transitional period that was designed to make sure that everything, all the officers and employees still had, or were assured of having the same powers that they otherwise had, so government didn't grind to a halt while this transitional period took place. And of course, that's long ago now, and we don't need any of that. That's why I think we kept the effective date, and we've kept 17.2, which probably we could actually live without as well. The prior sitting legislation, 17.3, that's fine. There might have been some ordinance before the adoption of the charter that's still kind of floating out there. That doesn't do any harm, but we got rid of the rest of that. There were some others in between where, and it may be also found in the election sections, as the council will recall, in changing to the council manager form of government. I think at the same time, we changed to elections every 2 years, but with staggered 4-year terms. Before that time, everybody was up for election every 2 years, just like the House of Representatives. So everybody's always running all the time. Mayors were up, treasurers up, city clerks were up, and all council members. And that worked, but when we went to the 4-year staggered terms, that left references in the charter that didn't match up with that. And we can dig into them, but you see what I'm saying. And we had to build some transitional periods because, of course, we had a bunch of council members, all of whom their terms are gonna expire. And so what happens in the next election? So there were some holdovers and some transitional periods built in to that charter change in 95. And we're getting rid of those, no longer necessary.
Okay, any questions? I don't see any. Do we have consensus on updating the legacy and transitional texts? And we do on that, so, okay. Going to the form of government. Does everybody like this form of government, or want to have something else?
So no change in the form of government recommended. It's just the current charter has a kind of an archaic diagram, maybe, if you want to use that term. It was suggested to be removed and just to be replaced with the definition of what our form of government is, council manager form of government. And we've included that text in red line.
So this proposes to delete that graphic?
Yeah.
And to replace and to add a definition of what a council manager form of government
okay,
is.
yeah.
And that's new text, and you see it at the top of page 3.
I do. Any questions or consensus on moving forward on that item? Okay, that one looks okay. Yeah. Okay, the election commission, 2.4.
Yes, and this was a suggestion from our senior deputy city clerk. This was just to add some clarification language that it's the state of Colorado's Department of State that confirms proof of residency. The current charter has that language in that proof of residency would be checked for qualified voters, and this was just a clarification statement.
Any questions on that, or do we have consensus to approve that change?
Margie, did I get that right? Is it? Okay.
And I got to go back to something else in an earlier section on 2.2. we talk about the general election being on the first Tuesday in November, and I think it's actually the first Tuesday after the first Monday in November.
That was a charter change we actually made a few years ago because there was a first Tuesday where there was not a first Monday at one point, I believe. So we had to actually change the charter so that we didn't have that issue again.
But you're right in remembering, the charter used to read the first Tuesday after the first Monday.
Okay, because national elections are the first Tuesday after the first Monday, aren't they?
No, they're
Just
just the
always
first
the first
Tuesday.
Tuesday.
Straight across
Is it
first
straight
Tuesday.
across?
Yep.
Yeah.
First Tuesday?
Yep.
Okay. My mistake. So, 2.7, recall procedures.
Go ahead, yep.
For many, many years, when you get a recall ballot, it'll say, shall so-and-so be recalled from the office of whatever it is. And then there's another section underneath where people who are running to fill that seat, if the person's recalled, run for that seat. And so the ballot is kind of an unusual one, but you've probably seen recall ballots, and that's how they are set up. And they continue to be set up that way. But a few years ago, the Colorado Supreme Court held that you're really restricting the right of voters to require. In the past, you had to vote for recall in order to be able to vote for, and your vote for the candidates to fill the office were not counted unless you voted to recall. And that forces you to vote for recall. And the Supreme Court said, you can't force people to make that choice. If they don't want to make the first choice, they can still make the second choice. And so there's language in the charter, and it's true, it got wiped out of state statutes. I'm sure it's lingering in many municipal charters around the state that say, in order to vote for one of these candidates, you have to have voted for recall. And so we're taking that out to conform with the Supreme Court's decision, which is the right decision. So that's what 2.7 does.
Okay. Any questions about that?
Real quickly, when was that decision?
Trying to recall, if I think it was 2 years ago, it was
Oh,
4.
fairly recently.
Because, I've learned to double the number. If you think it was, I think it might have been before COVID, I think, if I'm not, might have been. We haven't had a recall since then. If we had, I would have instructed in the structure of the ballot for us not to have that requirement, to ignore that requirement, because the Supreme Court's declared that unconstitutional, as it should have.
Any further questions? Do we have consensus to move that forward? We do. I had a question, Mr. Dahl, back when they're talking about at the bottom of page 4 in the recall procedure, it says talking about the petition is filed in the time specified and I quote, is proper in all respects. Is that really as absolute as it seems?
I suppose. I mean, recall petitions, there are elements and components that you've got to get right in a recall petition. And we, for recall petitions, for referendum petitions, for initiative petitions, they need to be in the right form before you really release that to the voters. And so I'm not worried about that language. I
Is
think
that
that's
released to the voters or received back from the petitioners?
fair. In this particular case, I think it's received back from I have to find language.
Okay.
But to give you a little comfort, I think, our charter also requires the city clerk maintain a group of forms, or a
Right,
set of
right.
forms for
Yeah.
all of these various
Yeah.
things. And that helps to solve that problem, but occasionally, and it has happened, that cities provided a form, usually it's on referendum.
Right.
And what comes back to us isn't the same for whatever reason. So I think that standard, I'm not offended by that standard being in the charter. Where on page 4 are you?
Well, I'm looking at the last paragraph,
Okay.
the second sentence, the second line in the last paragraph.
Petitions filed and proper in all respect. Yes, so let's think about this. So the recall petition went out and signatures are collected.
Right.
Right? And while the form might have been correct initially when it was sent out, it's got to be proper in all respects. And here's a good example. It's been disassembled and
Right.
reassembled. And so the warnings and the other things that are on the form weren't available to the people signing necessarily. And it's the city clerk's job, and this has come up within the last few years, it's the city clerk's job to make sure that that petition remains proper in all respects. So if you've got obvious disassembly, if now the petition form came back and some of the pages are a different color, and so you begin to wonder if the integrity of the petition form was maintained as it was being circulated. I think it's really important, actually. I'd push back and say it's really important for that standard to be available for the city clerk to say, well, this petition is not proper in all respects. It's been disassembled.
Well, and I was thinking of more of the signatures that were on the petition. Are they required to be proper in all respects?
Well, yes, in the sense that the city clerk has got to be able to verify that these are actually registered voters. And as you well know, there's a process we go through. But I think that proper in all respects really just reflects the standard that the city clerk applies to not only the physical form, the color of the pages, but also that, okay, there's no address. You've left out the city. We can say no for that reason. That's also reflected in the statutes on recall. But if the concern is that that establishes too high a standard, and maybe I'm putting words in your mouth, it, in my opinion, doesn't. That's really the function of the city clerk.
No,
make
but
sure of that.
if there weren't sufficient signatures on the petitions to move forward, would that be not proper in all respects?
Sure. I'm trying to figure out what.
Well, I'm looking back, well, we're going to go out and cure a bunch of signatures that are on the petitions.
Right.
And if they were not proper in all respects, why would you be going back to cure something that wasn't proper in all respects? Is there a difference there?
I'm not really following the question.
That's a state law.
Yeah.
To allow.
Yeah, so we have that. So.
Okay. Well, that was what when you look at proper in all respects, and just
Right.
take it on the plain words, you would say, well, why would you have to, why would there be a cure period? Either it was proper and approved, or it wasn't and it was rejected. So I'm wondering, where is the gray area?
Well, it's not so much gray as that's a gatekeeper to get to the council to set the election is a proper petition.
Okay.
And a petition could be improper for, again, the state, it's been taken apart and restapled, the color's different, signatures are insufficient.
Right.
There just aren't enough.
Yep.
And if that's all true, then there's a cure period, and that's fine. It can be cured for numbers of signatures. The city clerk in the past has rejected petition sections, for example, for not having the affidavit circulated.
Right.
So 20 signatures, even though they're fine otherwise, are out the door because so it goes back, it goes out, comes back. But the language of proper in all respects, I think, is still the gatekeeper language that the city clerk can rely upon before that petition's released to the council to set the election.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, let's go on to the next one, which would be, that was recall, city manager.
Yeah, section 3.4 under city manager's duties. This is a cleanup to fully implement the council manager form of government duties for the city manager. I believe that was an oversight that was not changed in the charter when we went to city manager form or council manager form of government to give the city manager the ability to sign all contracts binding the city. Currently, the mayor does those. The language is still in the charter for the mayor to sign documents. Remember that language required
His signature.
that require the mayor's signature. This just gives the city manager the ability to sign contracts.
Do we have a different dollar limit that we work to?
Today, the limit is, and this is not a charter detail or a code even, it's just a council policy that anything over 75,000, well, there's several different limits, right? Anything over $75,000, that's a budget. Even if it's budgeted, it has to go to council for approval. But then we also have a letter of delegation that the mayor has signed that gives the city manager certain authorities to sign certain documents under that $75,000 limit today.
And we have used that because of this chart, as the mayor well knows, and prior mayors before him, to address this, to work through this charter provision, because there are a lot of, and every day, there's something getting processed here at the city. And it, for example, there are various warrants and other things that are just really automatic that never find their way to council. And we've got to operate the city and pay for stuff and enter into all sorts of contracts. And the mayors, including Mayor Starker, have been very cooperative in signing a mayor's delegation letter that I invented a couple of mayors ago to address this, whereby the mayor says, I recognize I've got the power to sign contracts. I'm hereby delegating that to you, the city manager, for these following categories of contracts so that we can let the operation of the city progress. This would eliminate the need for that and would confirm the ability of the manager to sign contracts that honestly have been, there's money appropriated. You can't sign contracts that aren't in the budget. But it would allow us to be able to have the manager sign those contracts without having always a mayor's delegation order in place. I think since Joyce J., the mayors have been great about that, but I always have to remember to get it done.
Councilor Stites, Mayor Pro Tem Stites, pardon.
My question on that was, in 95 is a while ago, I think I was 10 or something back then, so I don't quite remember. Was the intent of when they switched this to keep that to where the mayor had to sign off on this, or was that something that was overlooked?
I think that was existing language even pre-95. In other words, that was, and I'll check in the book in a second, but that was language, I think, that was pre-existing in the charter prior to even the switch to the council manager form of government, I think.
Well, I understand that was pre-existing, but was the intent when they voted on this in 95 to keep that in the mayor's purview
I see.
and not move it to the,
Right.
just knowing
It could have
that they
been,
kind of switched
probably.
it, but they also kind of were like, we're not sure this is going to work.
Fair question, fair question. I think in 95, I have to get that ballot question back in front of me. But in 95, of course, we had to set out the duties of the manager that were, more than just the duties of the town or the city administrator at that time. And one of the duties of the manager, I think, presently in the charter, is to enforce contracts. And since then, continually been asked, and every manager will ask, can I sign this? It's the council approved it, now we're amending it in some small way, but does this need to go to council? And I would usually say no if it's appropriated, but it still is a contract binding the city, so it goes to the mayor. I'm not answering your question as directly as I know you asked it. I can't, let me put it this way. I don't believe that the who gets to sign contracts issue was really in front of the voters in any real way in 95 when the organizational change was made.
Okay, then, yeah, that makes sense. Is there any reason that we should try to keep it to where the mayor, is there any benefit?
It's an absolute policy call for the council, I think, honestly. It is another checker on the expenditure of funds and the management of the city, to be honest. The way we have navigated that check in the past has been this mayoral order, and the mayor, I would ask the mayor to weigh in, but a mayoral order that says, yes, I recognize that there's a lot of business in the city that happens every day. And it's the mayor's not here every day in an executive function. That's why we have a council manager form of government. The manager is managing the day-to-day operation of the city. I hereby delegate up within these limits so that you can keep that going. And so, but having said that, yes, there is the ability, if the mayor has got to sign contracts that are in excess of that mayoral delegation order and has a question about the contract, then that's another layer of review of that contract. And once in a while, it's true, the mayor will ask, what about this? And sometimes I get that email, and I assume Patrick sometimes does, before the mayor's willing. I should stop now and actually ask the mayor to reflect on that. policy question.
Before I do, I have a question from a counselor, so if I may go ahead, and Counselor Hulteen.
All great questions come from counselors. Yeah, this is actually a really interesting dialogue to me, and I feel like I mean, first of all, it was really fun to go back and reread the charter, first time in a couple of years, especially redlining all the he's. But I think, this discussion to me is at the heart of what the charter is to our city, so I really appreciate it. And we're fortunate that we have like a high functioning, high trust table sitting here right now in which, this is not something that is a crisis in our city, but, after us, I mean, we only revise the charter every so often. And I wonder if there isn't some sort of process or something in there that would allow, should council have concern about abuse of that they could call forth and ask the mayor to retake back that authority. I mean, is that a process that could take place? Like if council's like, wait, we're really worried, like we're, up against the rails and the budget has become much more pressing and we don't have, the people sitting here and we've got less trust. Like, could we put something in there that gives council the authority to request the mayor to
Yeah, council can act on, doesn't have to be in the charter for council to act on a procedure like that in the future, if you would like, to direct the
I mean,
mayor.
it seems to me like if that was in place, then I don't think we need more checks and balances in the charter.
Fair enough. To that point, there's who signs the contract, and there's really who authorizes it, who budgets for it, and is this contract a good idea? Or within the current, as you say, in the current, maybe a future sort of economic environment, that there needs to be just more care taken in contracting and spending money. The council has full authority to vote or to do an ordinance that says, we'd like to put together a somewhat different contract approval process for contracts in this category. That's perfectly consistent with a charter provision that says the manager signs contracts, because that's who signs it, but really, how do they get approved? So what you're asking is there latitude for the council if this change is made to continue to have authority over how contracts get approved? Absolutely.
Okay. And I mean, to me, I look down the line, I think the efficient running of our government, I mean, to have our city manager to be able to sign those contracts makes a lot of sense and is efficient and good use of time. And I just think about like, if I were mayor, and if I were having to think about signing contracts, that would be a lot of busy work. So anyway, generally approving this, I think it's a good discussion, looking at like where we were when this was in there and where we are now as a city. So I'm in approval, but if we were in a political situation where there was more doubt cast on the finances and management of the city, as long as the council or mayor has some authority to daylight those or readdress those, then I think I'm feeling super comfortable with it. So.
Now, Mr. Dahl, I didn't want to dodge your question altogether.
Please.
But I do have a question because in most of the significant contracts and significant expenditures that we have in the city, it comes before council. Generally as an ordinance perhaps, so I'm not sure whether it's a resolution or an ordinance. So is there a sort of a dollar limit or an importance factor on those issues and those expenditures that we have it's not in the charter, but in our codes or in our practices?
Yeah, our current practice is anything over $75,000, even if it's budgeted, even if council approved it in the budget, comes to council for approval. I think Mr. Stites was asking if, and you may not have been referring to this, but it used to be at 10,000 at one point, and that really slowed things down. So 75, we look at it as just another, I think, more of a transparency for the public to see these expenditures. It's been approved in the budget, but the budget, when it gets approved, is a very big document. So a lot of cities have a limit where it comes back to the council. I think a lot of cities, though, if it's already budgeted, they don't necessarily have to bring it back. So it's different in every city. So yes, short answer to your question, 75,000 is the limit for approvals for
And
appropriations.
does that seem like does it become practically a burden for you or the staff to do that?
I don't think at this point, 10,000 was a burden.
Yeah.
75 is not bad. There's not too many we have to bring back.
All capital,
Yeah.
right? I know, if I could just jump in and just say, I think it's something that our procurement manager would love to bring up for discussion with council at some point. It's not on fire. We're noticing a lot of our neighbors are going to higher limits. But I think I agree, what we're doing today works. We bring them to you as motions,
Okay.
provided the money is budgeted. So just to clarify that, it becomes a resolution if we're asking council to appropriate additional
Okay,
funds, right?
okay, so-
But otherwise, it's just a motion to approve a contract.
And also to make it more efficient, what we've been doing the last several years, if we bring a contract to you that's larger than $75,000, and it's going to require multiple payments over the term, we ask council to approve the full contract for, like, let's say it's $500,000 and all subsequent payments. So if there's payments that come forward that are over 75,000, those don't have to come back because you've already approved them.
So to answer your question, I sort of think that it's prudent public policy to have some sort of dollar threshold where if it gets to there, council has an opportunity to look at it, at least to put their eyes on it and say, yeah, it sounds all right. So, and I think it's prudent because, we don't make these rules sort of to service when everything is going well. These are when we're in a storm, in a strange sea, and you're looking for a stiff mast and a good sail to get out of it. And this is the sort of the mast and the hull and the sail of the ship. So that is sort of how I think you should construct it, and then still be able to sail it efficiently, kind of at all times. So I'll stop my boat analogy.
Fair enough. Fair enough. So the shift to manager executing on behalf of the city all contracts binding the city, which now shifts from the mayoral language over to the manager language is fine, understanding that it is the council that approves contracts binding the city above these levels that the council has set as the level that needs to be that council approval in the way that Ally describes.
And these are sort of, and contracts is a bit of a broad term, I think, right? I mean, would you see that this would be, approving plat Mylars where the mayor's signature is requested, or?
I think that's different.
That's still the mayor, that's
okay.
not a, contract, that's.
Or the agreements
another
that go with
instrument.
that, that's still outside of the,
Yeah, if you've got, for example, a subdivision improvements agreement, I think we presently set those up for the mayor's signature, do we?
Yeah.
I believe.
Yeah, I think so. Or at least the plat. I don't know
plats
about-
are.
I don't know
The plats
about
are,
FIAs.
certainly.
Yeah.
yeah.
I don't know about SIAs. I was thinking about this coming down here today. For example, deeds and other property instruments, for lots of good reasons. To begin with, it's a contract in the sense the city is saying, yes, we hereby convey this property to you, but it's also a conveyance of real property, and the title companies will always require that they see a mayoral signature, and the city clerk, not the city manager's signature. So there'd be a range of things, and sometimes we run into, bond companies and other entities we deal with that say, that's fine, but we need, our protocols require the mayor to sign. So that's why the retention of documents requiring the mayor's signature in 3.2 is important. And that language still remains in the
Okay.
charter. What's been deleted is all contracts in writing binding the city, all conveyances of interest in land. Honestly, I think I'd restore that because as a matter of practice, the title company is going to require that be a mayoral signature. Because they're going to say, well, that's a contract binding the city, or that's a contract we require the mayor to sign. So I was noticing that as I came down, I would restore that. But the larger policy question is if there has been a budget that accounts for this expenditure, this much for repaving, and now we get a contract in to repave, and it's been approved from a budget standpoint, and the council has seen it because, let's say it's over $75,000, all those approvals are in place. We've budgeted the money, we've appropriated the money, there's a contract that the council has approved. The manager ought to be able to sign those contracts, because you've gone through those levels of city approval.
Do we have questions on that? Do we, or a consensus to move as recommended? We approve as recommended. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. The next section, go back to my notes here.
Duties of
So,
clerk.
yeah, duties of the city clerk, section 3.8. This one, and I believe the next one, is to help us implement really the changes we've made over the years with city clerk and city treasurer's position. In the past, many years ago, the city clerk and the city treasurer did have staff under them that they supervised. We've made changes to that, again, to really align with the current practice and then also the practice of the council managed form of government. So we're suggesting to delete that the city clerk shall supervise the staff under his jurisdiction.
Under the city clerk's jurisdiction.
Yes, it would be. If we kept it, it would be under the city clerk's.
We're gonna have to fix that pronoun if
Do we have questions on this? And do we have then consensus to move this forward? We do. Thank you.
Okay. Next item is 3.9, same thing, but with the city treasurer. And this has been in practice since a couple of years since I've started. So we've been doing this for over 20 years. All the staffing was moved to the administrative services department.
Any questions or show of hands for consensus? We have consensus on that one.
Mr. Dahl, you want to do this next one? Section 5.10(1)(c)(3), building height and density limitations and the definition of family.
Sure. The legislature in this most recent session, which, as you know, was devoted in part to housing needs as a part of Governor Polis's administrative efforts, the legislature passed a statute that says it's not available, not legal for local governments to regulate on the basis of familial relationship. And it has, caused us to have to actually, and we'll look at some code changes too, because it's a classic to say, okay, a single family home can have a family, any number of persons related by blood, marriage, or adoption, and also no more than X number of persons that are unrelated. And the legislature saying, okay, you can't use familial relationship to govern residential occupancy. It sounds more difficult than it is in practice, because in practice, you'll actually have, bedroom and floor area restrictions and residential standards that largely protect you. But it will require some other code changes, which are outside of what I suppose we have to focus on here. But the charter, and I have it in front of me, talks about, defines a family unit, one or more persons related by blood, marriage, or adoption, or no more than three unrelated living together as a single unit. And it's all in aid of the residential occupancy 21 units per acre charter limitation. And so that's what that's in the charter as a sort of a definition to support that 21 unit restriction. That's not being proposed to be changed because you can have that restriction, but we've managed to deal with the language here by calling it a residential unit. It's not really going to change the fact that we have density limitations, because that's in our charter. We have height and density, which is a little unusual for a charter, but we're all aware of the fact that there's history here, and that's not proposed to be changed. But in order to be consistent with that state statute, we've changed the terminology.
Questions?
Yeah, I do have a question on that, Mr. Dahl. In that paragraph, under definition of residential unit, that the last sentence that was deleted, all right, the single housekeeping unit designed for the use of more than 3 unrelated persons such as blah, blah, blah. Each three persons in any unit shall constitute one family unit. And the reason that's being deleted is because that was counting against the density?
Well, it's, to begin with, it uses the term family unit, which is a familial relationship, which now we can't use. And we said, okay, shall we change that to residential unit? But then we came to the conclusion that this last sentence wasn't that necessary to energize the 21 dwelling units per acre standard that is really why you even have that definition. We felt that that the definition now of a residential unit was sufficient enough for us to know that and to enforce our 21 unit density standard. In practice, that density standard is much more effectively implemented in Chapter 26 of the Code of Laws, the Land Use Code. And we don't really need the charter much to be able to implement that because the Land Use Code has long since done that and more on that subject.
That helps explain it, thank you.
Yep.
So then, Mr. Dahl, would sort of 4 persons living together in an apartment, would that be one residential unit then?
Yes, yes, it would. And I know that as a result of this statute, we're going to have to look more closely at Chapter 26 and decide whether there are sort of, because the legislation went on to say, this doesn't mean that you can't regulate for safety and for residential health and safety standards, et cetera.
Based on square footage.
Based on square footage and I think plenty of tools.
Yep.
But the place for those tools and to really get down in the trenches and get it done is going to be in the land use code.
And we have changed some of the language already in the code where we used to say single-family residential unit. We're saying single. I can't remember now what we were calling it. We changed it to, we've got rid of family. Just single unit, maybe, is what we're calling it. But
There's no question there'd be more work to be done to implement that state statute, but the tools and the place to implement that, no question, is the land use code. And I wouldn't want the charter to get more complicated around that. In fact, less, because I want the charter to be not in the way of our being able to take whatever alternative options are good for us in the land use code. And this landscape may change even more legislatively, and I really don't want the charter then to be in the way of our being able to get done what we need to get done in the code.
And so this gets family out of the charter.
It does.
Okay. Do we have questions on this? And do we have consensus to move this issue forward? We do. Thank you. Eight point four.
Judge.
this is very similar to, somewhat similar to the city treasurer and city clerk item above, but this was a procedural change we made, especially most recently here, where we went to an administrative management model instead of a, what was the other model? Legal,
Be a
judicial
yeah,
model.
Judicial model, right.
So yeah, the administrative management models is where the court administrator, under the direction of the city manager's office, takes care of all the administrative matters. So we're suggesting that we delete language where it says today that the judge shall supervise court personnel and also that he shall submit a yearly budget. Both of those items are going to be done by administrative staff.
The judge shall.
What's that?
The judge shall.
The judge shall.
Are there questions or on this particular item? Do we have consensus to move it forward? Okay, we do. Thank you.
And if I might, Mayor, I noticed as we were working through this, we are past first reading on the new judge's contract, and you'll see second reading next meeting of that contract. And because we hadn't yet had this conversation, these two things, yearly budget and I think there's supervised court personnel through the court clerk or whatever language I kind of put together. That language should come out of that contract. So you'll see me on second reading asking for a motion to approve the contract with 2 minor deletions, and I'll ask that these phrases be deleted from that contract. I'll alert the judge that we're making that change. But this gives me the opportunity to explain to you why I'm going to be asking for that and make it less problematic when I do.
Okay, thank you. Okay, you're down to 10.12.D.
That one was consensus on that one. Did we get consensus on 8.4?
We did.
We did.
Yeah,
Okay.
we did.
Yeah, the last item that we have listed here anyway is amendments for adoption. Currently, the charter, interestingly, this is kind of a weird charter restriction. We thought we have quite a bit of authority with the budget administratively to move money around, transfer money within the budget that council approved, right? But for some reason in the charter, there's a line that says any transfer from, let's say, the police department to the Parks and Rec department between budget, even though it's already budget, has to come back to council for approval. We're recommending that we change that so that it gives us more flexibility, because we do, a lot of times there could be salary savings in one department over the course of the year, and we might need some funds for, let's say, water or snow removal equipment or something that pops up in the Public Works Department. Instead of coming back to council, we suggest that we delete this language so that we have that ability to do that administratively.
Moving funds around. Any questions on that? Consensus to move that forward? Okay.
That's all we had that we highlighted. If you read through the full red line, you see there was a few other very minor wordsmithing items that just kind of fall under the general cleanup. I believe one example is there was a section in the recall procedure where the city clerk has 48 hours to mail a copy of to the elected officer who's being recalled. That we're suggesting that changes to 2 days in case 2 business days in case it's sent in on a Friday. That would require the city clerk to have a letter out by Sunday evening or something. So that's one option, one item. There was a few others that were very non-substantive changes that we didn't feel were needed to be highlighted. But did you have anything else, Mr. Dahl?
I do, in terms of moving forward. This will need to take the form of a ballot question, right, to amend the charter. And the art in that ballot question will be encompassing all the things that are in here. And the law is fairly forgiving. You just need to be really fair and complete in your ballot question. But I would not expect the ballot question to be 10 pages long to say, shall this paragraph be changed from this to this? I've got a draft of a ballot question going, and now that we've had this session, I'm going to rely kind of heavily on these categories that are here. But it won't be a short ballot question because there's a lot of change, but happily the categories are definable. And what are there? Maybe 10 of them or so. So that next step for me will be to create some draft of that. And I know you're going to want to see it, and it will. I've got a question. It will probably includes additional technical and grammatical, et cetera, changes as shown. And when the ballot goes out, we also accompany it always with the proposed, changes. And so we'll have to figure out how we can best format those changes to make the whole ballot process understandable and transparent to the voters. So, any other question?
Councilor Hulteen.
Thank you. That was, so I think the thing I thought about the most over the weekend reading this was, we talked about, I think this stands alone, we should be doing this regardless, but we're also at the same time looking at another ballot measure this fall around the heightened density with Lutheran. And we were tying the discussion of, if we're touching the charter, how is this communicated? How do we talk about the value of these changes? Because I mean, going through all these technicalities, I agree with all of them. When I look at them as a whole, they feel overwhelming to me as the average citizen. to look at this, and I worry that it's going to default into a no, because it feels like a lot. So I'm not saying let's not do this, but I just think as we move forward with next steps and we're looking at how, how do we package this within our obligations on how we do ballot measures, I think we need to be really mindful of that, accurate and transparent categorization around this, so it doesn't, because, when I read these, I'm like, oh, the judge, the treasurer, the, election commission, recall procedure, these are all firebrand things nationally right now. And so I just really want to make sure that this doesn't end up like coming off as like, it's an administrative technical correction, but it can very easily read like we're trying to shuffle, our government's, chairs on the deck of our ship, our boat. So I don't have a specific like recommendation or request other than I think we need to be really, really intentional about that as we move forward with it, because if we don't package it correctly, it could impact other things that I think are aligned with this fall. So that's just, I wanted to raise that.
Counselor Hoppy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Councilwoman Alteen, for your comments. I agree with that. I would say my suggestion for further direction in this is there are places where there are words that if people see those words, regardless of what we did in that heading, building height and density limitations, right? It's going to send somebody through the roof immediately.
Yeah.
So I would caution, because all we did was change the definition of family to be up to term with the state law, right?
Yep.
So I would caution using those words that would send somebody down the wrong alley. And also some of these, like the ones that we're doing to comply with current state law, I think they should be together in the, like, to comply with state law, this and this, right? And I don't know that you actually need to say this section, because I imagine what we could do is put on What's Up Wheat Ridge, they're redlined, so people could go and see what the actual red lines look like if they get confused, because this is going to be a really hard story to tell without somebody having an opportunity to go straight to just be like, hey, get it straight from the horse's mouth, go to What's Up Wheat Ridge and check it out. Also, when you're looking at like the gender pronouns, and it says things like was changed by using position titles or other gender neutral language. Really, the other gender neutral language we used was person, right? And then other than that, it went to either the title, or I found the two theirs and the one they. I was like, I didn't see those. I read the whole thing. Found them, and they changed from upon there to upon the, right? So that's not even, I wouldn't even consider that a gender neutral change, right? Or, gender neutral language, So I think that, so I think I would just be careful around the way we tell that story. And then, like the kind of the legacy and transitional text and the like alignment into the like the council manager, pieces, the cleanup pieces around that, I would maybe package those together in the language too, right?
Good. No, these are all good suggestions.
Related, things that are related, I would keep them together instead of it being kind of, I understand for our purposes, we went through numerically, but I think that doesn't really, won't read very well in a ballot question.
No, it's really helpful. Thank you.
Probably topically. Counselor Larson.
Thank you, Mayor. And I completely agree that this is a fairly big project. And I don't envy the person that has to wordsmith this thing. There's a lot of nuance that will be read into no matter what you put in there. That's why I agree it is very important to have the marked up version available easily to find. You can, wherever it's located, it's like, oh yeah, you can go there and you can find exactly what we're changing. And it's not like we're trying to trying to hide anything. So I think that if those two things are done, and I agree with Councilmember Hoppy that rather than try to numerical or chronological or any other sort of order, by subject would be the best way to organize it, and then have readily available the marked up copy.
Mayor Pro Tem Stites.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I agree with everything that's been said. I do, because everything that's been done is very innocuous, right? There's nothing in here that's controversial, but I was kind of joking before the meeting that it's all in how you spin it, right? Because when you start throwing words like family and gender pronouns, and those are all very hot, and height density and things like that. So what I'm happy about that we are probably moving forward with this, and the other question at the same time is we are going to be doing a lot of education and a lot of outreach prior to this election. So I think that we can, as a council and as staff and as a city, we can get out and kind of beat the bushes and make sure that we're educating people as far as what we're doing, what the intention of this is, and that, there's no massive changes coming. This is just a cleanup. And I think those are the words that we really want to use as we're talking about. This is a cleanup, and we're just trying to get everybody going. Thank you.
Councilor Hulteen.
Thanks. I think Councilor Hoppy really did a good job. And so I just captured 3 categories. So there's compliance with the higher jurisdiction. So whether it's state compliance with the higher jurisdiction. So there's been a legal change at a higher jurisdiction. And then changes that fall under accuracy or clarity of definition. And then modernization of administrative practices. And so I think everything falls in one of those 3 categories. And if I think about what it looks like to talk about this as a ballot measure, I think those feel really understandable and I think are clear and accurate. And to everyone's point, making sure it's really easy for people to actually go through and see what the changes are. But as a story to tell, those 3 categories, I think, make a lot of sense and don't really raise unnecessary flags.
Can you repeat the number 2 again, the second one?
Accuracy / clarity of definition.
Okay.
No,
And so I think like the genders and the citizen neutrality, family, like there's some things like that, or just clarifying the definition. Okay.
Would that include then this legacy and transitional text stuff?
It might be modernization or, well, yeah.
Because that's pretty obvious that
Yeah.
this stuff is outdated and should be removed.
Yeah. Modernization. Cool. Great. Thank you.
All right. Any other observations, questions, clarity? Okay. You have enough direction
Yeah,
on this side?
maybe a couple, just real quick, summarize the next steps. So we do have another study session where we'll bring back a draft ordinance July 15th. We need to notify the county if we're going to participate in the 24 elections. So it sounds like we have consensus that we can notify the county clerk. We're going to have at least one ballot question on. Am I hearing that you are wanting to move forward with this? Then we'll bring forward the first reading of the ordinance August 12th, second reading August 26th. We'll also have an IGA that we'll bring forward with the county clerk for the coordinated election. So in the last day, we submit the ballot language to the county, September 6th. So we're on schedule. We've got some good time left here to come up with a great draft.
Okay. Councilor Hoppy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I just would like to ask for consensus that we ask staff to come back to us in a future after this year, sometime next year, to discuss what we want to do as a future in elected city clerk and elected treasurer. Because if those are some things that we might want to maybe change those are bigger pieces in our charter. And if those are some things we might want to change in our charter, then that's something we should be reviewing over the next couple of years. Timing wise with elections for those 2 offices, it will need to be done into 2025 or the 2026 so that they're not running for office while we're running a question asking to get rid of them as elected officials. And so I just wonder if I have consensus to bring that forward. Thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem Stites, or are you signing on with Councilor Hoppy and Mr. Larson? Thank you. Okay. Anything Anything else? Okay.
That's it on this one.
All right, well, let's go to, we still have, what, city managers matters, staff reports.
Just a couple of quick things. We have another Shop Wadsworth initiative that has started to encourage residents to shop businesses on Wadsworth during the reconstruction of Wadsworth. There is information on Local Works' website about this. The more you shop along Wadsworth, the more opportunities you will have to win $1,000. Program runs through July 31st. And lastly, the new Tin Cup Ridge / yard waste collection site is open now, every Saturday and Sunday through the end of October from 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. It's at 151 South Rooney Road in Golden.
And do
That's all I
they just take yard waste?
They take, well, I don't think they take like grass clips and stuff, but they take branches,
Branches,
bark,
okay.
things like that. They have a whole list of things they don't take.
Okay.
So go to the website.
Okay.
Yes, and I think it's pretty inexpensive. It's like $25 a load. It's usually a pickup load. It's considered a load, so it's not too
All right.
expensive.
And elected officials reports. Counselor Hulteen.
Thank you, Mayor. So I've got a couple things. I will just say Happiness Gardens looks awesome. So I, last week actually was in Rancho Cordova, California, on behalf of the city, representing our interests at the Transportation and Infrastructure Systems National, the retreat. And I wanted to share that what's coming out of there are a couple of things, and I think they are really to the benefit of the city, so I'll remain strongly engaged in advocating for. One is to turn the Safer Streets and Roads for All into formula funding that all municipalities would get, and that would be funding that would translate into investing in more safety in our community. But the biggest thing that's really coming out of it is really strong advocacy that I'm helping shape on the policy subcommittee to ask for the next transportation reauthorization, that the funding goes directly to municipalities and to our MPOs, so that we've got more direct funding that we have more control over for local and regional priorities, and that it doesn't have to touch or go through the state. So really, and there's some pretty bold and exciting numbers attached to that NLC is proposing that we advocate for. So the next steps with that will be policy development over the next couple of months, and then recommendations coming at the city summit in November in Florida. So just want to let everyone know I was representing that. And then I have a question. What tools does the city have to request bike parking be installed somewhere? I do most of my grocery shopping either at Sprouts, which has bike parking, or at Safeway, which does not. And Safeway, because it does not have any bike parking there, people, including myself, end up fixing their bikes to the ADA ramp, because it's the only rail that's in front of the Safeway. I'm very mindful about doing it not in where wheelchairs would be accessing the ADA ramp at the south end of the Safeway store. However, twice this week, I cannot tell you how many times I went to the grocery store this weekend, but twice this weekend I went, and there were like big e-cargo bikes that were in the ADA ramp, because it is the only place to fix a bike there. So I don't know if that's something the city, I mean, I would love bike parking everywhere, but in particular, this is creating a conflict so that people now in wheelchairs are forced to actually go into the roadway because the ADA ramp is blocked by bike parking because it's the only place to park. So
Yeah, it's a good question. I don't know. We'll look into it. I don't know what we can do retroactively. I don't know if even new development plans required or not, but as you know, we've been making changes to residential development that have to require.
I think in the
So-
commercial, we have bike parking in the
Yeah,
commercial.
so I'll look into it on what we
Okay.
could do on something like a Safeway.
Yeah, just because, it's creating conflict for the
Yeah,
ADA use.
yep,
Okay,
okay.
right, that's all I got, thanks.
Counselor Rome.
Thank you, Mayor. And I've asked about the bike parking, e-bikes for commercial, and had conversations with Paige over at Local Works to try to see if we could do some conversions, like City of Fort Collins have taken a parking space and doing something decorative. And so I think there's some opportunities for some partnerships, with the city, with the businesses, to try to get more people, because I see this as inevitability of having more and more e-bikes and having them. I have conversations with people, you know, that have traded in their car for the e-bike and they're doing the grocery shopping. And so we just need more opportunities, and I'd like to see more conversations with those businesses, you know, whether it's with the economic development staff, local works. And then on a different note, I was able to attend the ribbon cutting for the Ives, which was, it's a big milestone. We had a lot of officials. Of course, we had the mayor, we had Mayor Pro Tem Stites there, and Dan was there, Councilmember Larson, and we had Commissioner Tracy Kraft-Thorpe, and then we had my predecessor, Zach Urban, who represents HUD, and then we had several other really higher ups from HUD come from DC, which I thought was, I was very honored and humbled that, you know, this was not a huge development. This was a 50 unit. So this is a very small development, and there was somebody representing Representative Pedersen, some staff, and there were a lot of people that kind of came together to get this one small unit that is going to be part of maybe someday a future development when funding comes. But I just thought, like, wow, that, you know, and they said too, having those conversations when I was talking to Mayor Pro Tem Stites about, like, would there be a possibility of opening this up to the public? And when I was talking to some other people with Foothills Housing, they said that they were amenable to something like that if people were interested in seeing those units. And let me tell you, though, when you walked inside the units that I saw, like, I was ready to move in. They were beautiful. They did Shopworks Architecture did a fantastic job with the lights and the windows, just really nice. And it's like, when you're looking at, like, where do I want to place something, you know, and I look at, it's, you know, it's right on our, you know, our major arterial. It's got a really great access. And then I also think about, like, you know, I would definitely put a higher price tag on that unit that faces the park. That's such a, you know, great amenity. And so I think it's a great spot. So I could go on, but I'm gonna yield my time. I think I was really happy to see everybody there and the support of everybody. And I think that it shows well for Wheat Ridge that we're really in this for affordable housing.
Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem Stites.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just to tag on to that, I really do think that it would behoove the city and Foothills to get as many neighbors to go and tour that facility, because I think the thought of affordable housing to a lot of people is run down, you know, nasty looking apartments. And what's been built at the Ives is an amazing, beautiful facility that's going to serve our community very well. So I hope, because we talk about neighborhoods and we talk about, you know, arteries and different things like that, and this is somebody's neighborhood. I know it goes to a major street, but it backs up to somebody's neighborhood. And I had the opportunity to stop in at the District 2 meeting back in October, whenever it was. And I think with a little bit more education, those neighbors are really going to get to like that facility and what's going to come with it. So thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Larson.
Thank you, Mayor. And yeah, as another attendee at the ribbon cutting at the Ives on Thursday last week, it really it impressed me how I guess just important this project is seen from other places. There were bosses on top of bosses on top of bosses. This is like the, you know, a good indication of the structure of some government departments, because there were some heavy hitters there, and it really kind of made us feel proud that Wheat Ridge is on the forefront of this. It's an impressive building. I had a chance to go around and look at some of the rooms and the way the first floor is set up. It is, again, a facility that I think between that and then the Van Street lofts down the street, both of these within the past couple of years, highlights the fact that Wheat Ridge is moving forward with housing. And then the other thing I'd like to mention, remind folks that we're just 2 weeks away from Ridge Fest that's coming up. It's made at Anderson Park. I've already signed up to volunteer, and I will see everybody there.
Is there any more reports to be done or business to be not transacted but to be noticed? We will be back here 1 week from tonight with a regular meeting. And at that point, we will be transacting lots of business.
Yeah, and also, I'm sorry, this Wednesday is a holiday. City businesses or facilities will be closed. The rec center will still be open, I believe. But Wednesday is Juneteenth.
Right.
So City Hall will not be open.
Okay. Thank you all for being here. We will stand adjourned.